Okay, so we are winding down that Derby trail. We only got a couple of big weekend race weekends coming up. This Saturday is the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby, and then the following weekend we got the Santa Anita Derby, the Wood, and the Bluegrass. So we're really 2 weeks away from knowing more or less what the Derby field is going to look like. Let's talk real quick about the Florida Derby before we move on to the Arkansas Derby. It's got a couple interesting horses, lightly raced horses like Tappan Street, Disruptor. Sovereignty got the worst of it from a post position perspective. He's drawn all the way outside. Madicat Road's in there as well, coming off of that huge second in the Rebel. And as John mentioned earlier, the form from those Arkansas preps has been flattered so far, with Tistastic coming back and winning the Louisiana Derby. Looks like a lot of speed to me. You got the horse Neoquos from the rail, who I thought actually ran pretty well in the Fountain of Youth, running third behind Sovereignty, stretching out to 2 turns for the first time. Pace was pretty quick, but there's a bunch of other speed. Disruptor, they're going to take a lot of money for Todd Pletcher off that big maiden win, but he's going to probably want to be forward as well. Madicat Road took the blinkers off, so maybe the strategy is to let him sit off the pace just a little bit. So I'm curious to see how this race shakes out from a pace perspective. But I don't know, it looks like a pretty clear break between the haves and the have-nots. I think you got 5 horses who could potentially win, and then 5 it's what the hell are you doing in this race?
Yeah, there's 5 seat fillers, as I like to call them, in this race that are there just for the experience and for the free lunch. But really, the race, I think, Joe, starts and ends with the outside posts, Madicat Road, Tappan Street, and Sovereignty, which are 3 horses also that are represented in our contest. But interestingly enough, those are the horses that I think have the best chance possible. Disruptor, I think, is an interesting, horse that could hit the board as well. It's just, again, a question of whether or not the horse can go 2 turns and go that extra quarter of a mile, which is a big difference. Now, he already won going 7/8, which is a really difficult distance for a horse to win at in the first place. But now he's going to have to do it against winners. He's going to have to do it against better horses, and he's going to have to do it another 2 furlongs further, which is not an easy thing to do. He is a gun runner out of a Speightstown mare, so he shows speed from Speightstown. If the gun runner part takes over, the 9 furlongs, 9 panels should not be an issue for him at all. But otherwise, Joe, I'm looking outside in. I'm looking at the Sovereignty, Tappan Street, and Madicat Road. And I would be shocked if somebody other than, I would say, those 4, maybe Safi's horse on the rail, could get the rail trip. First time going long, last time going from 6 furlongs to 8.5 furlongs. Now just being asked to go a little bit further. But yeah, I think that if any of those 4 or 5 don't win, it would be a shocking display for me.
And the thing about Disruptor is he's not going to be any kind of value because of the Todd and the IRAD thing and the Rapoli money. He's probably going to be 5-2 in this race, and I think he's got a lot more to prove than that. But yeah, it should be an interesting race. Sovereignty, though that outside draw is usually death at Gulfstream, but I think it's a little bit better if you're a late running horse like him. He can hopefully just drop over. But looking forward to that, and obviously looking forward to the Arkansas Derby on Saturday.
Why is that, Joe? Why would you be interested in that race?
Well, I was promised a free shirt if Sandman won, so that's the first incentive. The second one is we are heading down there. We're going down to Hot Springs. I've never been to Oaklawn before. I was never at Fairgrounds, so I'm checking off Fairgrounds and Oaklawn back-to-back weeks. So really looking forward to that and being down there with you and Len and some of the West Point partners. But this to me looks like a 3-horse race, maybe 4 if Speed King can get back to his good race. Mm-hmm. I just think the thing that worries me about this from a Sandman perspective, John, is Baffert's horse looks loose. Unless Speed King really, really decides to go and there's a hard send mandate from Ron Moquette to Rafael Bejarano, Cornucopian's just supposed to clear and have it all his own way. Now he has to stretch out from 6 furlongs to 1 1/8 miles. That's a major, major league stretch out, so no guarantees there. I think it's interesting that IRAD is in Florida. Mm-hmm. IRAD rode this horse in his debut at Oaklawn. He's in Florida for the Gulfstream races. You don't always know the machinations there, but Johnny Velasquez, obviously a super fill-in. He looks loose to me, John. I think the main thing is can he get 1 1/8 miles? Because if he can, we might all be running for second.
Yeah, he may be a super horse. I mean, there's no question about, based on the way that he ran first time out, going 6 furlongs, finishing in 109, and just, went gate to wire and was really super impressive.
It took heat on the front end.
You're right. And just kept going. Super impressive. Now, he's got a couple of hurdles that he has to overcome. Number one, like you mentioned, the outside post. So he's going to have to clear everybody in order to get to the front. Number two, he's got to go from 6 furlongs to 9 furlongs, which is a super big difference in the grand scheme of things. And Into Mischief is a brilliant sire, one of the best of our generation. But for the most part, they have a little bit of a difficulty going 9 and 10 furlongs. And again, a lot of stallions do. A lot of stallions progeny can't go that far. So that's number two. Number three is, and I thought this was really curious, Joe, and let me know, your thoughts on it. So the horse Cornucopian primarily trains in California. They brought him to Arkansas. He won, and then they immediately shipped him back to Santa Anita, and 14 days later had a bullet breeze, 6 furlong breeze, and then a week later brought him back and did a modest 5 furlong breeze in a minute flat. And now they have to ship him back to Oaklawn. That's a lot for a young horse to take in. It's a lot for an older horse to handle, let alone a horse that's only run once. So, would I change positions with anybody in the race? I don't think so. Could Cornucopian be that good? Yeah, he absolutely can. When you run a 101 buyer in your debut at that stage of your career, I think it was the highest buyer in maybe ever, right? But I think it was the highest buyer, at least in the past 10 years or so, by a debuting colt sprinting. That's a really heady number. That's a really, sit back and take notice kind of a horse. I don't think he's going to I think he's going to have to work to get the front, because I think Speed King and their camp are going to look at it and say, when we got headed last time out in the Rebel, our horse did no running, so we need to be on or close to the lead. They're gonna gun, and I think that Dwayne Lucas, I mean, that's always his MO, is to go ahead and send a horse, and he did it with Seize the Gray in the Preakness, where he basically said, "Come and catch me if you can." And I don't know if you noticed this also, but Publisher, who's the maiden in the race, they put blinkers on him to try to get him to show a little bit more speed. Now, he's not going to be out there wing-dinging it in 22.
I was going to say, he's been 45. 1,000,000 lengths out of it.
Right. But I think they're trying to get him to be a little bit closer, to the front end as well. So to me, it's Best Friend Rocket, Speed King, and maybe even a little bit of Coal Battle that could push Cornucopian. But I like our position from the fact that Cornucopian has to get past everybody going into that first turn before he can go ahead and settle down and slow the pace down the way that he wants to. So I think it's going to be a really great race. If Cornucopian is the superstar that his first race showed, then we're all running for second place anyway. But if any of these 3 or 4 new things that they're throwing at him hamper him in any way possible, then there's a couple of horses in here that have a legitimate chance to win.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's one of those horses that he can win by 10 lengths. He can run last. Anything in between, nothing would surprise me.
Right.
So we're just going to have to see what we get. And I've been banging this drum for a while. I got to see more early speed out of Sandman. He's got he's got the jockey change to Jose Ortiz. Not that Christian Torres did anything wrong. Right. Jose Ortiz, a little bit better of a speed rider, I think. I just think he's got to be closer, not just for this race, but for potentially the Derby too. Yeah. You don't want to be 17th, 18th early in the Derby. There's just too many horses to navigate, too much traffic, too much has to go right for you to be able to win. And especially in a race like this, I'm not imagining it. He went 21-4 in his debut. The next start at Saratoga, he was stalking 22-2, 45-4. Obviously, don't want to see him go that quick, but I have no doubt that he's going to be best going 1 1/8, 1 1/4.
Mm-hmm.
The distance is going to be no problem for him. He's fit as a fiddle. Mark Cassie's done a great job keeping him fit. If we're a dozen lengths out of it, unless there's a runoff speed, John, I'm going to be concerned.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, Joe. I think that the race for Jose Ortiz knows how to ride good races. I mean, I'm not going to tell him what to do or how to ride the horse. But I think that if I was him, what I would do is try to situate the horse to be in the second pack and try to allow him to stretch his legs out and get into a rhythm. And that to me is the most important thing for a horse like Sandman is when is he starting to get into gear and into rhythm where he's feeling comfortable. And a couple of these races, even obviously the Southwest because he broke so badly, but a couple of these races where he sat off it, that was because of his natural lack of speed. And I've heard people say, well, why don't you put blinkers on him? Or why don't you do this? The horse either has speed or he doesn't. I mean, if you force him in the beginning to have speed, then you're taking away from his ability to come from behind later on. And you're also trying to ask him to do something that he's never done before. And do you want to do that the prep before the first weekend of May? I don't think so. I think there's enough things. Again, we talked about Cornucopian and all the new things that are being thrown at him. I think you want to keep that to a minimum when you have a horse that's getting ready, hopefully, to run in the Kentucky Derby. But Jose Ortiz, I think, is, even though he's ridden the horse a couple times before, that was early on in the horse's career. He's a very different horse than he was back then. And he's been training on that racetrack, really since Thanksgiving. And it looks like that he has a real fondness for that track. Hopefully, the extra panel is going to make the difference between where he finished last time and hopefully hitting the wire first. But yeah, I think honestly, as much as I love our own horse, the race goes through Cornucopian.
Totally, yeah. And I hope that home field advantage comes into play. Either way, it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. Cannot wait to get down there. Let's punch our ticket to the Derby, guys.